Mr. Anuj Puri to make his presentation on large-scale opportunities in the real estate sector. So you would have 10 minutes for the presentation. Over to you now.
Sitting at home for a long time, you've started to understand how to mute yourself if you want a peaceful married life. Thank you very much, Pratap, for inviting all of us. And it was a delight to hear Mr. Suresh Prabhu. I'm sure he's very busy, and yet he's been able to find time to come in and address. So it's great. Thanks to Shreyal as well. I'm going to do this presentation, which is probably going to be even less than 10 minutes, Shreyal. There is a lot to talk about this subject, which is really about creating business opportunities in Maharashtra through large-scale construction projects. But I'll try and cover it up as I said, in less than 10 minutes. It'll also set up a pretty good context in what we are trying to do with the panel discussions following this. So the first one, sorry, I'm just trying to roll this off. On Maharashtra, I don't know how many of you would know that it is the second most populous, but the third largest state. All that I want to say on this slide is really, it is like a mini Singapore. I mean, if you look at the second column, it is the highest contributor in economy, and the GDP of Maharashtra is equivalent to that of Singapore. It's also got a very young population. I mean, nearly 50% of our population in Maharashtra is less than 24 years of age. And we're finding a huge amount of digitization that's going on in Maharashtra. What are the advantages? And I'm going to take very quick slides on these 4 or 5 pillars where we're finding the advantage to Maharashtra, starting with the infrastructure and the proactive policies that the government has. It is amazing to see that Maharashtra has got 50 major and minor ports, already in operational, 13 full-fledged airports that are going on. It's also a city which has been very proactive with policies. The RERA was implemented in Maharashtra. 29,000 projects are listed in Maharashtra under RERA, and nearly 45% of the total projects under RERA are coming in from Maharashtra. It also generates a huge amount of employment. If you look at it, 143 of the Indian Fortune 500 companies are headquartered here. Nearly 1.7 lakh crores of exports happen through this state. So, it's as we said, it's a pretty large economy equivalent to that of Singapore. What are the ongoing projects that are helping us bring in construction? Mr. Suresh Prabhu also said this is that if the economy has to grow in a particular country or in a particular state, it has to be construction led. And this is what you're going to see in the next few slides, the amount of activity that is going on. I mean, it's just mind-boggling when we were putting together this presentation to see 30 lakh crore of projects, infrastructure projects under various categories, whether it is transport, logistics, or water sanitization that are ongoing currently, which is pretty large, 30 lakh crore. I mean, many countries would not be spending that kind of monies. Just digging a little bit deeper into this is in real estate, we're seeing a number of activities that are going on in energy, in the social infrastructure. And I'm going to go in the second part of this presentation a little bit, a couple of slides on how financing is happening on these particular sectors, which are contributing to these mega projects, including now you're seeing the communication, food processing, media and entertainment, which has been a big part of Mumbai. And Mumbai has been known for Bollywood, and we're seeing a fair amount of investment that is happening within this city on all these projects. What's happening on the real estate, one of my pet subjects, but I'm not going to go more than a couple of slides into this. It is nearly 53% of the total sales in India on residential. 53%, nearly half of the value of the residential market is Maharashtra. The rest of India is the balance half. So, it is so significant. This is what it shows in the slide, that how significant Maharashtra is on the supply and demand. One of the pet projects of the state is the Dharavi redevelopment project. I hope it actually starts to see the light of the day. It's been on for a very long time, and yet we are just continuing to roll on it. If you look at it, it's nearly 28,500 crore one project, and it will hugely impact the families there. Nearly 67,000 families are going to get 350 square feet of permanent, legal, authorized, built up space if this project was to come through. It has been on the track, but with various challenges, as we've written at the bottom of this slide, the project starts and stops. The other one that I want to touch up on the next two slides is these data centers. Again, this is one area in Maharashtra. Why data centers is doing very well is because these undersea cable, is really coming up one side Chennai and then one side in Bombay. And that's where all these data center guys are wanting to set up their data centers. Why data centers become popular in India suddenly is because of the government of India's policy on data protection, where all these foreign entities who were storing Indian citizens' data overseas have now to start storing data in India. And we are seeing a huge amount of investment coming into Maharashtra, more particularly in Bombay, on data centers. Logistics, if you look at it, we are really second to NCR in providing warehousing, industrial parks, on the logistics. A number of the international players like ESR, Indospace, Ascendas, they have very large developments that they have already undertaken and are continuing to construct in Maharashtra. And it's one of the largest logistics puller within the foreign investors. Just 2 or 3 slides. Pratap had asked me to speak very quickly on what is the financing model of these. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but 2 things I want to pick up on this slide. One is this municipal bonds. I think this is a fantastic way to be able to finance from the government side. It has seen stop and start, just like the Dharavi projects, but I do feel is that if these are structured well, it's a great way to be able to do it. And the second is the asset monetization, where many of the public sector, state governments can sell their assets, ring fence the money, the proceeds that they're getting, to be able to utilize those proceeds for greenfield expense. So these are some of the two most popular ways of doing it. Obviously, we are aware of the public-private partnership. In some of the asset classes, it has done very well. For example, airports in India, it has done very well. In many others, it hasn't been able to do as well. We think, finally, if we have to navigate on the financing, there needs to be a better coordination, better collaboration between the state and the central government. And only then you will be able to see a lot more possibility of funding coming in from international resources on these projects. My last slide, really, this is the way forward that we believe is that many things will need to be privatized, decentralized from the center to the private organizations. We also think is a lot of the development will move towards the tier 2 cities, or at least to the periphery of the tier 1 cities, to be able to de-densify once the infrastructure, once the construction starts. And hopefully Pratap is going to be able to bring out this point during the panel discussions. We believe is that there needs to be a better incentivization of the private players to be able to unlock the opportunity on monetizing some of the assets, some of the infrastructure projects, some of the greenfield projects that we have to do to be able to really bring this out. So that's what I had. I'm going to stop sharing the screen and hand it back, Pratap, to you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Puri. Those were some very good insights. especially like you mentioned, 30 lakh crore infrastructure projects under various categories is definitely a big opportunity. And with these insights coming from you and to what Mr. Suresh Prabhu also shared with us, I think it set the perfect tone for Mr. Padode to take this discussion forward. So, Mr. Padode, over to you from here. You would have 45 minutes for this discussion. And also for all my viewers, do not forget to key in your questions for the panel. We would be happy to take it up at the end of the discussion. Over to you, Mr. Padode. Mr. Padode, we are unable to hear you. Could you please check your mute?
Yeah, good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Construction World Maharashtra. I think we've had a very great grand opening with Mr. Suresh Prabhu's keynote and the presentation by Anuj Puri. I think we've laid the ground for our first inaugural session, Sustainable Development and Large Construction Projects. I hope all of you are safe and maintaining safety protocol. We have a long way to go, but I can see the light at the end of the tunnel, especially for Maharashtra already. And keeping fingers crossed, we should be getting out of the woods soon enough if we all work at it together. Maharashtra, I'll just share some few slides with you all meanwhile. Maharashtra launched its industrial policy in 2019, targeting $1 trillion as making it a $1 trillion economy, which is a tough one, considering that we had just a close to 400 billion in terms of an economy that we had done so far. So large projects, Maharashtra, like Anuj said, 30 trillion worth of projects. And of course, we can see why some of them are here. You can see this tunnel boring machine on the left image out here. You can see the Marina project. And I think these are some of the projects that we're going to discuss in these sessions forthcoming. We have the Maharashtra Samruddhi Mahamarg, which is taking place between Mumbai and Nagpur and replicating the success of the Mumbai-Pune corridor. This is also likely to really accelerate development across this corridor. I'm told nearly 22 townships are going to come up on the way. So there is the collateral benefit of just this corridor is immense. There's a great multiplier effect of this project. The Mumbai Trans-Harbour Link, it sort of connects the island city to the entire land mass across the seas. In turn, probably capping real estate from going haywire, but at the same time allowing a lot more interaction between people commuting, making everything possible. We have the coastal road projects, again decluttering the city, decongesting it. May look fabulous at the end, and I have some questions at the end with some of the panelists on this, how it's going to change the entire cityscape of Mumbai. Just to mention that Construction World has also promoted First Construction Council, and its board of governors include very eminent people, as you can see them on the screen. Yeah, so I'll stop sharing now and let me come back to our panel. So going forward to the panelists, I want to first take on the questions to Mr. Nanda. Mr. Nanda, I think the projects, we have seen 30 trillion, as Anuj Puri said. Projects have got an inflation factor attached to it, and that has primarily come on account of the land acquisition policy, is what I believe. When you're going to pay 5x of the market rate to acquire land, obviously the road on which the land on which the road is going to be built is going to charge toll accordingly, or the metro rail is going to charge toll accordingly to make it viable and sustainable. So do you think that ever since this has come about, our economics of sustainability have been jolted in the wrong direction?
Pratap, you are right that nothing in life is black and white. You gave the example of the coastal road. If I was living in Versova or some Andheri, I would say I'd love it because it'll take me half an hour to reach home instead of 1.5 hours. If I was living on Breach Candy, I will say meri view khatam ho gayi. There are ways to, the technology has moved that very far. There are ways to balance it. We have a problem in this country. The purists want things done in the conventional way, and their conventional way is kuch mat karo. On the other hand, pardon my saying so, some vested part interests want to do things differently. And somewhere the mid path gets missed. We don't have much time, but I don't know much about Coastal Road, but I do have friends on both sides of the thing. I have friends like Cyrus Gazdar, who are the purist, who said it's a totally wrong thing. There are other people who say that it will make the city will grow faster. The first of all, the problem is the real estate prices are very high. If this road comes through, can you imagine that it will go much beyond Vasai Virar? So there are always advantages, and what we should do is we should find a solution. If we are reclaiming X square kilometers of land, how do we do it? There are ways to do it. You can do afforestation, you can do things like that. I remember that during the time of Manoj Joshi, I had started water transportation from Warsaw to Nariman Point. The fishermen lobby did not allow us to land at that place, and we had to land somewhere near where that H2O thing is. Now, how can you bring somebody from Warsaw and leave him at Chopati, and he doesn't know how to go from there? There's no connection from Chopati. Now, I am saying that the problem is in our country, unfortunately, and I'm a citizen of this country, and I'm part of the system, and I have to be blamed. We have too many interests. I think we need people. You look at the current pandemic, and I don't want to get into detail here. You see what our leadership was doing in the last 4 months. One of my problems is that we don't have statesmen. I'm stop here. We don't have statesmen who look at things objectively. I am telling you that you can do sustainable development. I have done industrial parks of 3,000, 5,000 acres. We've not cut one tree. And there was a situation where in Chennai, we had to take a road through the forest. And instead of 100 trees, we planted 1,000 trees only 5 kilometers from that location. Due permission.
Right.
So we have to find solutions which are acceptable to all parties, and we should not get into this polarization of, we have polarization.
All right. Mr. Nanda, I'll come back to you. Just taking the same question forward to Bharat. Bharat, do you think this project inflation, which is that the same question that I put to Mr. Nanda, but I think, with Maharashtra's 400 billion GDP currently, of course, we did very well between 2012-13 to probably 2018, where I think the average GDP growth of Maharashtra was around 12 to 13%. But then it has subsequently dropped. And with this pandemic, obviously, where they're projecting a negative 8%, how to reach a trillion economy in the next 5 years, you really need to completely change the game. And with this land, I think the land acquisition policy is going to be one big stumbling block which people don't realize. Your views?
No, thanks, Pratap, for having me, and great thoughts, at least till now, from the experience and the flamboyance. And Anuj made a great presentation on to pep up the whole mood here, which is great. So, in fact, I would like to take your sort of example a bit further, that it's just not the pricing, frankly speaking. We just do not have infrastructure. Price, you worry if at all price is viable or unviable. And this audience is fairly knowledgeable, so I don't want to preach anything. But very clearly, I'll just give one simple example, and that will give out a very clear and loud message. And I'll just tell you a story, because it's not that this state doesn't know. In fact, this state monetized assets of Mumbai Pune Expressway 10 years before NHAI, who is now the mother of asset monetization and gets all sorts of credit. We did it 10 years back. This state achieved the kind of power capacity which is only next to NTPC. So very clearly, it's not that this state did not know what infrastructure is, but unfortunately, we lost our way somewhere in the middle. And this one story should tell you about this land acquisition and what it means to this whole situation. Not too far back, in the year 2015, not too far back, right? Gujarat ports handled 3.66 million TEUs, or just million containers of cargo. And in that year, JNPT handled 4.5 million TEUs. So we were clearly bigger than Gujarat ports. Last year, in FY21, guess what? Gujarat ports handled 7.6 million TEUs with the pandemic hit. 7.6, their traffic doubled. And how much did JNPT handle? 4.67 million TEUs. Our traffic grew at 2% over the last 6 years. Gujarat grew at 13%. Let's understand, we are living in the world of competitive federalism. Every state is competing for the same dollars. If you can't evacuate the export and import cargo of your own state and the ports are choked, what's happening here? Nothing wrong was there with JNPT. It had the most efficient operators. We had Port of Singapore coming in, like unfortunately 5 years back, and putting in such an aggressive bid. But they could not get the evacuation. Why? Because we could not acquire land for dedicated freight corridor even now. Even now, the 75-kilometer stretch in the middle, there is no land. And that's why this traffic of almost 4 million TEUs have shifted in a way which could have come to Mumbai, has gone to Gujarat, right? So that's the reality. So I would say, forget the cost. If you get infrastructure, Maharashtra has enough and more money to pay. But I agree with your point that if you inflate something 5x, very clearly the viability suffers, because NHAI toll per kilometer is not different in Maharashtra versus non-Maharashtra state. So obviously cost will be different. And what did NHAI do recently? That they are not expanding 4-lane to 6-lane and 6-lane to 8-lane Mumbai-Delhi NH. They are creating an alternative route which will create structural business risks for the old concessionaires, and they will go via all the random places of Madhya Pradesh and Rajasthan and all that to reach Delhi at a road which will cost 1/3 the cost which all the landlords were asking. So again, time and again, I'm saying 70 years, unfortunately, 70 years after independence, in this kind of an August gathering, we are discussing a basic issue like land and the pricing of the land and the pricing of the tolls and everything else which will happen with the land. But I think the answer is very simple. If we have to get into 1 trillion, I think it is possible. In fact, all the good things which Anuj highlighted, if we did all those things, even if we get into 10% band of 1 trillion, nobody's going to kill us, right? But issue is that we are becoming irrelevant in this unicorn economy. Let's get that right. Whether the next IIT grad, which we will produce in Mumbai, he will be living in Mumbai, or most likely he'll go to Bangalore, where his private equity and the whole ecosystem is there, or in Hyderabad or somewhere else. And then you have a different situation. So I think that's what we have to stop. So I think it is logistics, it is manufacturing, and education. If we can get these 3 pieces right, believe me, this state has a potential which others will just imagine. It's only we have to blame ourselves for stalling our own developments so that industries are going somewhere else. Even after paying 4x for the land, if we can get the right pieces in place,
So,
I think demand is there.
So Bharat, one more piece is housing, and I think I want to go to Gurjot Bhatia. So affordable housing is only affordable when it lands at the periphery of the city. So it's way outside, and obviously when the IIT grad wants to move to Bangalore, is probably because he doesn't want to stay beyond the periphery of the city. So what are we doing? I mean, is affordable housing going to remain at the outskirts? Or is there some other policy in the works that you think we should bring? Because government has talked about giving land from various public sector or other organizations for such purposes.
Yeah, so I'm actually glad you asked me this question as a follow-on from the ongoing discussion, because it kind of has a great segue, which is that I think this problem. I'll just take 2 minutes to reflect back on what was just discussed to your first question, and try and connect. Is that I think this problem persists for every city around the world. You have certain areas in the city where the land prices skyrocket because of whatever other reasons, the valid reasons. It's not unique to, say, the state of Maharashtra or Mumbai per se. The idea, the point is that how do you plan, or how do you create the grand master plan for a greater region which has all the sustainable constituents in it? You have the coastal road coming up, so you plan accordingly where you can monetize the high land prices or the shortage of land over there. And whatever the earnings from there, I'm not trying to oversimplify the whole issue, but I'm trying to connect it to the wider thought, which is that you earn the money from there and then you plow that money. And now we'll come to the affordable housing part, which is that, the first thing is the definition of that word affordable itself. Whenever I speak about it, it invents a lot of styles, because what is affordable? So that I'm not going to get into that discussion yet, because is it 8 lakhs, 12 lakhs, or is it, some people say, for some people 25 lakhs could be affordable, so on and so forth. But the biggest challenge that this sector is facing today is accessibility and the conurbations from the major cities, and that is why, while there is a lot of work happening in this regard, a lot of development companies, almost everyone is focused on this, because we're talking of high volumes. The government has put up very ambitious targets, looking at 22 million houses by 2024, which is right here now. If you look at it, it won't take much time to reach there. And also with the the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, etc., and also the Swami funds, which is at the back of what has happened in real estate in the last 2 odd years. These policies and these catalysts are in place to spur demand in this sector, or spur growth. But the big piece that is missing, Pratap, is the accessibility. So we must, I'm trying to tie it back to the earlier discussion, utilize the earnings and the opportunities that exist from the larger cities, or the more expensive part of the cities, and then plow them back into creating those opportunities where these projects become viable and these projects become achievable, where people can actually travel to work or from work every day, living in somewhere which is in the outskirts of the city. And it is forced to be in the outskirts of the city because, one, even if you had the money, you don't have that much land where you want to create a mass housing scheme. And at the same time, it's also to do with the price of the land that you get to make the project viable enough for whosoever is developing it. And I'll just very quickly add one thing, probably we can come back to it later, I don't want to take too much airtime, is affordable housing per se. And I'm not saying this is not happening. The good part is that wherever meetings, whatever discussions we have, because I'm someone who's in the core field of construction or project management. So there's a lot of discussion on how can we use mass production initiatives, whether it is, and look at affordable housing as more as an industrial initiative or a production initiative rather than a bespoke, as we used to saying, okay, this particular housing scheme, that housing scheme, how do we make it factory finished, factory ready, speed to market? People who are developing it, they start generating and earning revenues as quickly as possible. You can control quality. You can control the lifespan. You can control sustainability of the end product, and so on and so forth. So I can go on and on, but this is my take on this. I think this is, if not one of the most important initiatives to spur more demand, more growth in real estate. And again, tying this to Maharashtra, the discussion which is about Maharashtra. Maharashtra, as we all know, is not just about Mumbai. The unique thing about Maharashtra is it has many, what I call stellar cities, which already have, earlier reflecting back on Anuj's presentation of what Mr. Nanda said or what Bharat said. You look at logistics, you look at data centers, you look at industrial development, you look at the population, or the urbanization, which is happening in cities besides Mumbai. So I think we need to look at it as all these, this whole strategy across cities tied together, and then look at this particular subject.
Yeah. So before I go to Mr. Ankur Gupta, I want to come back to Mr. Nanda. Since you build cities, and going by the way infrastructure is needed, or you can keep mounting a cost of infrastructure on a city like Mumbai, where you got to connect kilometers of, on the island to a hinterland across on a bridge, and make another one which is a coastal road, and such expensive mega projects need to be done because the city is just exploding at its seams. But at the same time, we need to develop other cities. So affordable housing is much more affordable and much more central in other cities when it is planned right from the beginning. What do you think? Where are we going wrong there? Are we really doing enough, Mr. Nanda, on that?
As Gurjot correctly said, what is the definition of affordable housing? To me, the definition of affordable housing truly is when your driver or the guy who sells you vegetables on the thela outside, or the guy when you come down from Nariman Point office who's selling chai can buy a house. And there are very much more knowledgeable people like Anuj and Ankur and Gurjal and Bharat on the line than me. Normal wisdom is 4 to 5 years gross income is what people can afford to buy a house. जो 15,000 रुपया कमाता है वो 7-8 लाख के ऊपर में he cannot afford to buy a house. And let me tell you, Gurjot said something which was music to my ears, and that's what I have been telling people. I said, we come from a manufacturing background. We should be the most successful there because we have to go into doing it as a factory rather than a construction site. Now, what is it that is ailing? The ailing part is there is a long term and a short term. The long term is, as Bharat mentioned and Gurjot also mentioned, we have to identify the areas and put connectivity there. The railway lines crisscross all over the country, all over the state of Maharashtra. And when I was younger, I used to live in Pune, and I remember in Deccan Queen, there were people who were daily commuting between Pune and Bombay. This is in the 70s. Today, life has changed. I'm talking of 76, 77. So if there is a proper housing in Karjat or anything with a proper connectivity, it's not. So, but that will take little time. You might have to build a railway station. You don't have to put a new railway line there. You have to put a railway station. And that is what succeeded for Mahindra World City, Chennai. I picked up a site next to a railway station and put a station there. The train started stopping. And Infosys, Wipro, you name it, they were all there. We created 1 lakh jobs. It's not difficult. But I'm saying that there are lower hanging fruits today. The lower hanging fruits today are NDZ, salt pan lands, things like that, which just require, you don't change NDZ into any housing, it will lead to corruption. But if you say that the NDZ land will be used for less than 300 rupees, less than 300 square feet and less than 30 lakhs of rupees, then the land cannot be misused. And you may even say the houses will be auctioned through MUDA. I'm just saying that as Mahindras, after 75 years in business, we are willing to do businesses which have social impact. But these are all solvable problems. as I go back to the more thing, I am been in business. Next year, I'll complete 50 years in Mahindras. I have seen life that we unnecessarily complicate matters. How simply Bharat put it, and Gurjot said put it. I mean, we built millions of lines of the railway line, but we put it just जहाँ पे मेरी constituency है. No, we have to move from जहाँ से मेरी constituency है to जहाँ पे उसकी जरूरत है.
Yeah, Bharat, you want to add something?
No, just one more point I want to add. You know, why should the Navy, the Army should be in Colaba? Why should the Army be in Koregaon Park? Can you imagine what we can do? I think there are solutions. We need willpower.
Okay. All right. We come back. Bharat, you wanted to add quickly? I want to go to Mr. Ankur Gupta.
Yeah. In fact, what Arun sir said is what I wanted to really highlight is that very simple things can make wonders. Like, this whole bullet train project, right? 1,10,000 crore project is what kind of Anuj puts it. But the beauty of that, and when I did my financial model around the bullet train, actually I fell off my chair. You know why? Because as you all know, that 80,000 crore of that is coming from Japan. Well, that's not like a big thing. What's the big thing is that interest which we are going to pay is not 0.1%, 0.01%. My father-in-law will not give me such a loan. So that's the kind of loan that is.
Hey, you have to have better control on your father-in-law.
But sir, what I'm trying to highlight here is that 30% of this project is in Maharashtra. 35,000 crore capex is going to happen in Maharashtra. 3,000 crore worth of land is what is going to be bought within Maharashtra. Maharashtra is to invest only 5,000 crore for getting this 35,000 crore of economic activity, and all the GST, that 42% will come to Maharashtra as well of this economic activity, right? And we are stalling it. 2/3 of the land is in Gujarat. 88% of the land is acquired, and only 32% of the land of Maharashtra has been acquired. That's the difference. It's a simple thing. If you want to generate economic activity, that's the simplest project where government has to invest only 20%. 80% is going to come outside of the country. So even banks are not required, and they're de-risking, and they're not so great liking for infrastructure. All those things are not there. And it's a ready-made project.
And that loan at 0.1% is actually for 50 years. 50 years.
50 years
0.01.
And 15 years, no repayment.
No,
repayment starts after 15 years, and by that time the traffic will be at least 25 to 30,000 per day kind of situation. And that entire loan will be paid for by the passengers only. Government doesn't have to pay. It's only bogey which people are throwing. India has to progress, and you can see the change. But I'm saying, put things aside, just do capex, create jobs, which is what is required in Maharashtra right now. And these are the ready-made projects, which is what we are definitely.
No, Bharat, bullet train, I totally agree, is a no-brainer actually as a Kickstarter, a huge Kickstarter accelerator for Maharashtra. Going on to Ankur Gupta. Ankur, so Katera is into so much of building technologies, but somehow we are lagging behind in use of precast and the modular construction. What is holding us back? Is there a policy thing that we require to tweak, or I also understand even in terms of hospitals, you guys can really put up something like a 500-bed hospital in 15 days, as I heard. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, thanks, Pratap. Modular construction, yes, Katera is the leader in India today, leading in modular construction and precast technology. The issues are not really with policy as much as they are with mindsets of people, and I've been hearing that across the table today during this discussion. Policy is fine. Policy is neither for precast nor against precast. It would be nice if policy was favoring precast. It would certainly help, but that's not the issue. The issue today is that people are wary of precast construction capabilities. People don't want to change. There is the normal resistance to change the way things are done. But then if you look a little bit outside the country, if you look at the Middle East, I mean, I'm actually sitting in Dubai at the moment. If you look outside here, you see how this country or the city has been built with precast technology. You look at most of Europe, you can actually see buildings just coming up almost magically. But that is the whole thing. You are actually moving a lot of the construction activity from the site to a factory. Now, you move something to a factory, you are producing material and goods under controlled conditions. So therefore, your curing of your concrete, your cement, your quality of construction, your specifications, everything comes out under controlled conditions. So, you're curing a concrete block under controlled factory conditions and not subject to the vagaries of the weather, right? For instance. So you are splitting the construction into two parts, one on-site, one off-site, and therefore your buildings come up twice as fast. Now, they not only come up twice as fast, but they also come up so much more, so much better looking, so much better in terms of quality, so much more sustainable buildings that will stand the test of time for many, many more years. So this whole modular construction just needs a little bit more acceptance. Today, if you look at our competitors, our larger competitors, they are not so much into precast, if at all. So we are today the largest precast construction company in the country, but we are still very small. So this is basically the issue of acceptance by developers, by others who don't either understand it. The architectural community in the country, the construction community in the country doesn't quite understand what precast is and the benefits that it can bring. There are many who do, and these are our, if I may call them, our favorite clients, because they believe in it, they've seen the benefits, and they want to use it again and again. So it's just changing the mindset of people and basically converting construction into a form of manufacturing, as Mr. Nanda just said. So if you could do that, you can really give a great fillip to the construction industry in this country. Like
So
many other.
I'll ask you a follow-up on what you just said. The whole scenario has changed in real estate from letting projects, nurture for a while because the real estate prices used to go up, or versus now completing projects in time, or you get saddled with penalties and so on and so forth. So now it's in the interest of realtors to actually complete projects ahead of time, in time, and therefore understanding precast to my mind appears to be a no-brainer. Why should not be doing it?
It is absolutely. But then, I think, if I look at my clients today, we have three kinds of clients. One that love precast, one that will absolutely not touch precast, and everybody in between. So the guys who love precast, they come back to us again and again because they have seen and quantified the benefits. And you're absolutely right. With RERA coming in, with accountability coming into the real estate sector, which was much needed, precast becomes a logical choice. We spoke about affordable housing a little bit earlier. Can you imagine a factory-produced modular construction where you can build a SRA block in Mumbai, in half the time, and great quality construction that you can never achieve with conventional construction, right? So, one of the things that we do, for instance, is we build these, what we call pods. So take the case of a bathroom, right? We actually build complete bathrooms in the factory. Now, when I say complete, I mean it is plug and play. We have the concrete bathroom, we have the WC installed, the shower installed, the plumbing done, the electrical done, the wash basin is there, the taps are there, everything, the mirror is there, the towel rail is there. All you have to do is pick it up out of the factory, put it on a truck, take it to the site, and basically connect it up in place. So you grout it in place, you put in the electrical connections, you put in the plumbing connections, and your bathroom is ready. So think about an SRA building in Mumbai, how quickly we could make that, replicate it again and again, and have this ready and available to the masses. And obviously, when we do something on a large scale construction basis, we will be much more price competitive. And that is what affordable housing needs. I mean, I can't do much about the real estate costs, but we can certainly help with the construction costs and the construction time. Now, think about a developer who starts getting his return in 1 year instead of 2.5 years. Isn't that worth a little bit of premium to pay? Isn't a better quality housing worth a little bit of premium to pay? And what about the end users? People who actually pay developers today and book an apartment. And you go around this country and you ask people how many of them get their apartments delivered on time. Right. Single digit percentage probably. So is that not something worthwhile where we can go out, promise people that their houses will be delivered on time, and they are actually delivered? So
I'll quickly add one more thing to kind of make a cause for what Ankur said just now, is what construction industry has been taught in the last 1 year is the dependence on the seasonality of labor. See, one of the things that stood against mechanization or factory made construction has been the cheap availability of labor in our country, which is great, which was our advantage. It had its problems, but it was an advantage. But will it continue to be an advantage as we've been taught over the last 12 months? In the last 3 weeks, we have read press on the exodus of migratory labor from bigger cities to their hometowns. So I think that would also be another push to this particular topic. And I think, I can tell you this very quickly, is that almost 100% of our customers, which are large development organizations in the country, when we go and speak with them, the good part is everybody's asking that question, which was not the case 2 or 3 years ago. Everybody's asking that question. They're asking us to do a cost-benefit analysis, and then they're taking those decisions. So I think we have started to discuss this across the tables, which I think is a good movement from where we were 2 years ago.
So you're saying we're at a tipping point now.
Gurjot, just I'd like to add a point there. Labor has been a problem in the last couple of months. I mean, the labor is actually migrating back home, fearing lockdowns, fearing a repeat of what happened last year. And, our industry and this modular construction precast industry depends on half the labor that the conventional industry depends on, because most of our construction work is done by machines in our factories, not at the site. So even when labor is in short supply, we are able to progress quite significantly. Yep. And on the hospitals issue, I just came out of a call from a potential client who wants to build a 200-bed COVID specialty hospital, and they want it in 10 days. We may not be able to do it in 10 days, but we can certainly do something in a month. You want to build something really fast, which is the need of the hour today, and a huge social impact on people of this country, where you see all these horrific videos of people dying outside hospitals and by the roadsides. I mean, if we could build these hospitals, in 30 days, my God, what a great thing that would be. So
clearly, I think, this pandemic has taught us that speed of execution of construction, for causes like hospitals, etc., was never imagined before that speed would be needed. But at least we have a solution now. I want to go to Anush Puri on a completely different scenario where we have already invested in certain, projects like the Ambi Valley. We have constructed Lavasa. We have, we've seen the JP Infra in Delhi. They could not complete a whole lot of apartments. So is it time? I mean, we've already invested huge amount of resources in this. Years have passed by. These magnificent ideas and plans on paper have been actually brought on, have hit and broken ground and been built. Some tweaks are needed to actually, we talk about asset monetization. Here is absolutely asset depreciation, huge asset depreciation taking place. What can be done about it? You market properties, and I wanted your ideas on this.
It is true, Pratap, but it's a fascinating discussion. I mean, from where Mr. Nanda started, the benefits of the infrastructure to how Bharat picked it up, that how you will be able to finance some of these expensive, infrastructure projects, and Gurjot talking about the affordable housing. And Ankur, I came in this morning from Dubai. I've been there as well for quite a while, and it's just fascinating city. What's going on in there? And Pratap, one of the things that you said is the real estate prices. The real estate prices, they go up and down, but it is independent of what Ankur is saying is the way that they're constructing, the quality, the benefit to the environment, the speed, the delivery, not necessarily trying to play the market. So I absolutely agree with what Ankur and Gurjot have said, is that it'll start to move that way. And then I land in Delhi this morning, and Pratap, this is sort of infested with the question that you've asked, which is Noida. I mean, over 170,000 apartments incomplete that are kept in, and we're just not adding up Ambi Valley and Lavasa and many other such townships. So what is the solution for this? I mean, honestly, I don't know what the solution is. I mean, there are probably four things. One, Gurjot touched upon very briefly, which was the Swami Fund. It's a sovereign fund. It's a Government of India sponsored fund. It gives money to complete the development, but there's a restriction. Over a certain value, they will not give if the apartment is more than 2 crores in a tier 1 city, and less than that if it is in a tier 2 city. So what happens in Bombay and Delhi, where most of these apartments are more than 2 crores? So Swami Fund really cannot give them the money. And not only that, Pratap, I mean, it's only one fund, Swami Fund. I mean, it can't cater to the entire India. Is it that we go to some of the special situation groups? And there are a number of special situation groups, and maybe some of them have been bailing it out, like Oak Tree, PAG, SSG, many of these. The only thing that the cost of funding of these is very high on the special situation. It's between 18 to 21%. In real estate, it is very expensive. Gone are the days when Mr. Nanda would say is that it wasn't a problem to be able to afford those kind of rate of interest. Today the margins aren't there really to be able to give it. But in some special situations, it is happening where, the developer knows it's a finite time that I'll take this loan and complete it, any stuck project. Third is, Pratap, some other developer steps in the shoes of the previous developer, but it's fraught with a lot of issues, a lot of legal issues, a lot of the issues of the home buyers who bought it. And in the past that we've seen where the developers have stepped in the shoes of the previous developer, they've been fraught with a huge amount of litigation from the contractors, from the previous home buyers, from the lenders, and it just becomes very difficult for the new developer to be able to really go on. One of the things, Pratap, as you were asking this question to me, was that maybe it's a reverse public-private partnership. Pratap, in my presentation, I said public-private partnership, where it was a public asset and private parties were coming together. Maybe in this one, it's private asset, and maybe Mr. Nanda, public entity needs to come in. And this morning, I'm sitting in our Gurgaon office, and they were telling me that NBCC, Mr. Nanda, they've taken this Amrapali project, and they said 54 units were auctioned and several hundred applications came up. I mean, Amrapali, where nobody was touching, Gurjot, you live in NCR, where there was nobody who was touching it, because NBCC took it over. 54 units is all that they auctioned and several hundred applications. Maybe it is that reverse, because maybe, these are the entities, maybe NBCC is one, and, Nanda Saab will be able to sponsor this better. But there could be some other government agencies as well who step in, who bring in the credibility, who bring in the ability to negotiate with the lenders, ability to negotiate with the government agencies, ability to negotiate with the home buyers, ability to navigate the RERA, and that's how maybe that the solution comes in. But Nanda Sahab, there will be both pros and cons of this as well. I'm only looking at one side of it. I'm sure there are other views as well. But happy to take your inputs, Nanda Sahab, on this one, a reverse public-private partnership if we were to do.
Anuj, as you know, SEZs, very few SEZs succeeded in this country. And I had made up my mind from the beginning that we will bring state as a partner because the nahi hoega. But going back to Pratap's question, I didn't do much work for Ambi Valley, but on Lavasa, my team did a lot of work. There is economic viability of the project is not a problem.
Oh, wow.
The economic viability of the project is not a problem. The economic viability can be sorted out, and post-COVID, when everybody wants a second home, the profitability, the viability will improve. You see suddenly the need for second homes has gone. The problem is that there are question marks which a group like Mahindra cannot answer. So the specific answer to your question, Pratap, is that if the government really wants to resolve this, and there are various forums where NCLT and others, whether these things happen, they should get the 3 or 4 agencies which are the question mark for us: environmental, water pollution control board. Tell them that what is required to be complied with this, then we factor that cost and we will bid in. But today I don't know whether I will get because see, it had a township approval which has been cancelled. Now under that, so even when US the Chapter 11 happens, there is one thing which is there.
Cleaning up, washing machine.
No, but Anuj, you remember in the old days we used to buy factories, etc., through the courts, because then what happened was that the past sins were Ganga Snan.
Yeah, so that happens even in Ireland.
One solution, which is Ganga Snan. And there the government has to come up transparently. And that is where I liked Anuj's idea and I immediately did a thumbs up. The moment it's a public-private partnership, nobody will question कि a private sector ने पैसा बनाया. But he's right. You cannot have 5,000 crores stuck in a project go down the drain because there was some political vendetta or something when somebody did something wrong. I don't want to get into that, but I am telling you today, if somebody is willing to come and say कि I'll take care of the environmental, the forest issue, ये आपके 5,000 एकड़ में से 1,100 एकड़ आपको मिलेगा, 3,900 ग्रीन छोड़ना पड़ेगा. I will do my economics कि 1,100 एकड़ में मैं कितना पैसा कमा सकता हूँ. But today I don't know whether I'll get it or not. I don't know what will happen with PCB. I don't know what will happen to. Yeah.
Mr. Nanda, now actually is the most perfect time for introducing this, when NCLT and corporate insolvency issues have been all quite resolved, and you have ILFS being taken by Uday Kotak as chairman, and he's got the Ganga Snan over it, and we did even some other companies like that, where you are not blamed for the past sins of that company, and your new management actually can steer this forward.
I will discuss ILFS offline, but I will just like to make one point that Satyam was resolved by Deepak Parekh and other committee in less than 2 months.
Correct.
And today, Tech Mahindra is what it is because it took over Satyam. We didn't write off 1 rupee. We did not sack one person. And the objectivity with which it has to be sorted out is very important in this issue.
Yeah, Bharat, you wanted to add something?
Like ILFS, no? Different sector, but it was the same thing.
Yeah, I'll just make like the simple point is that India is passing actually through the Thatcher moment, as I call it right now, where the government has already announced, that they want to get out of the business, lock, stock and barrel, and except for a few things, they don't want to do anything, right? So in fact, they are not willing to take on more on themselves. And here is like, we are telling them, okay, boss, you come and you... So here we are doing PPP, government wants to do PPP and give it to Nanda Sahab. Nanda Sahab is saying, no, Baba, you also come. So I think, yeah,
Bharat,
it has to be a mix of both. Yeah, that's right.
I agree with you, but normally you would not like Mr. X child to be adopted by somebody.
Exactly.
If X die in a plane crash, the child will have to be adopted by somebody else. No, this is a very
Absolutely.
see what I am saying. I'm not trying to save Mr. Whoever. I don't want to get into names, but
Yeah.
there are tens of thousands of people who in JP have put their lives. I know people who in Mahindra companies who before 3 years before retirement bought a flat, put their life saving, and they're not getting the flat. Uska kya hoega?
Okay, we've got last 5 minutes. I want each panelist to tell in a minute how to make Maharashtra great again. So can we start with Bharat?
Yeah, sure. So I will just kind of remind what I ended with is that these three things, which is very, very important. First is the HR, which essentially is the education, which it was a hub, and somehow we're losing the edge to some other states. But very clearly, if we can get education, logistics, and manufacturing, and all the three are actually the strength of Maharashtra. I'm not asking for something new to come to Maharashtra. We just have to rediscover ourselves, focus on these three core competencies, rehash that, and remember one new thing which is happening in the world, which is the ESG. Because these three words will get the money. And without these three words, money will not come. Whatever you may offer, an amount of MOUs you can sign. We have seen what has happened to Andhra Pradesh and MOUs and the new cities which were supposed to be built through an MOU. It doesn't work anymore. So it has to be competitively built. It has to have governance framework wrapped around all of these things. We should stop signing MOUs because those things, frankly speaking, will now not happen because somebody will question at some point in time and it will fall apart. If we did these three things right and do not allow land to hold whole thing to hostage, like what we are doing in a bullet train or a dedicated freight corridor, I think we will be definitely be great again.
All right. Gurjot Bhatia?
Sure. So I think in purely speaking from a construction perspective, I think we can, as Mr. Nanda, Anuj, everybody said earlier, I think there could be a lot more done on the policy or public-private or private-public domains. But I think we can do a lot with what we have in terms of the policies which have been put in place. GST has been reduced, say, for example, on the affordable housing side. So a lot of, I won't go into too many details because we're just wrapping up. But a lot of things have been done. We need to build on that. And I agree with Bharat. I think what we need to look at is not just confine this growth in small portions or small areas, which is like, say, the metropolitan areas. Obviously, they need to be looked at. They have a lot of issues, a lot of things need to be done there. But we need to look at a more sustainable growth because unless we address the affordable housing, for example, affordable housing as an issue, it is somewhere tied to the bigger metropolitan areas as well, And so we need to look at more sustainable opportunities that exist there. Infrastructure, which eases the pressure on small pockets of land in metro areas needs to be developed. I think that's the other big thing that needs to be looked at. And I think what Bharat said earlier, logistics, I think is a great way to do that because it then helps you set up these nodes, which could be in the outskirts, but provides you access, provides you jobs, provides you growth in those particular nodes. So according to me, these are the 2-3 big things that the state must do.
Right. Ankur, can we have your views?
Sure. I would there's a thousand things you can do, but generally speaking, from our perspective, I would call them the 3 I's. The first one being taking some initiative into new technologies, into disruptive technologies, into efficient technologies that will bring about a sea change in the way things are done. Second is obviously investment, continue to make the state more investment friendly so that people bring in technologies and investment. Like we've put up a precast factory in Navi Mumbai. And third is obviously, many of my colleagues have talked about it, which is the infrastructure development in every way, whether it's from affordable housing or building roads and bridges, whatever it is, that infrastructure needs to take a quantum leap. So that's what I would say from my perspective is very important to make Maharashtra great again.
Anuj, your views?
Just very quickly, I think it's been sort of mentioned already, Pratap, all of them. First is to create more employment opportunities. Second is, drive the economy, boost the economy. I mean, it is a fantastic economy. Can we boost it further? So you generate more employment, boost the economy further, and continue to invest in infrastructure.
Right. Mr. Nanda, I think you also had that one innovation that you all have done, something on furniture.
Yeah, I'll talk about that. Just first of all, Pratap, let's not say let's make Maharashtra great again. उसमें थोड़ा political sensitivity हो जाएगा. तुमको we want you safe and happy, so we don't want you to say. So use the word greater.
Okay.
So,
right.
see, the question. See, I have two things which are easy and one thing which is not easy. The two things which are easy, my colleagues have made some very important points, including what Anuj said about creating employment, because ultimately if you if the people start spending, it has a chain effect. And that's the first objective. There are many low-hanging fruits which we need to identify and do it. If you want to do something where land acquisition is required today, it will take 10 years. You can't take that project. You'll have to take up projects which are, and you raise the Lavasa issue. You say we will give it to you provided you complete it in 3 years. तो लेके आएगा ना लेबर कहीं से, नहीं आएगा तो अंकुर गुप्ता को लाएगा, वो खत्म करेगा उसको. So low-hanging fruit is one of them. Two is, we have to find solutions. I was talking at a very important seminar on, there is a committee set up by government called Atmanirbhar Bharat. I happen to be one of the junior flokis there. So Anuj is nodding his head. Thank you, Anuj. Yaad rakhunga main. So the SEZs failed not because they were economically not viable, because the Finance Ministry and Commerce Ministry did not see eye to eye. That is why the SEZ failed. And I'm going to write a book on that. The third is we need to have a mix of politicians and professional people at decision-making level. You bring somebody from a small town, he may be very good. Can you imagine if at that time the gentleman is no more, he was a very well-meaning gentleman, he passed away. If you had brought a business finance leader like Deepak Parekh or some other names of that stature, where the economy would have gone? We need to have, and that is where Clinton, with all his things, America did better during his time than Trump. Trump brought chamchas. Clinton said, "Main ash karunga, but I will bring the right people like Sommers and others to run the business." And I'm saying that political parties need to take care of the people, but in key areas, industry, finance, infrastructure, these areas you bring home and other things, but bring professionals. It is absolutely, I am not saying it, I have no desire to get into politics at 73, but I am telling you that you need to get competent people in the government.
Right.
You may have, just one thing, you may have read, how did Israel manage to solve the COVID problem the best in the world? And what was the reason? The CEO of that country went to Stanford and Harvard. And I'm not saying Stanford. You can get the same quality of people from IIT and IIM. तो उतना ही सोचेगा ना वो. And I'm not saying, yes, make the chief minister from there, but bring people. दुनिया में बहुत अक्कल वाले लोग हैं. अनुज पुरी को हाउसिंग मिनिस्टर बनाएगा तो तुम्हारा कंट्री का प्रॉब्लम सॉल्व हो जाएगा.
There comes another birth of a politician. I think we've run out of time.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nanda, Mr. Parekh, Mr. Bhatia, Mr. Gupta, Mr. Puri, for a very, very energizing first inaugural session of Construction World Maharashtra. And let's give this hand over back to Shreyal. Shreyal.
Yes. But I think this has been such an intriguing session, and I wish we could have taken more time there. We've been having a lot of reactions from our viewers, a lot of comments, questions. I know we're running short on time, but Mr. Padode, can we just take one or two questions that have been coming from them very quickly? A lot of
Sure,
it is
sure.
already covered, but if we can just quickly just see through. So I'm just going to flash it here on the screen. So we have one question on that where Safdar Khan says that you have a lot of mega projects happening all over the country, especially in Mumbai. But there is a challenge when it comes for jobs for freshers like civil engineers. So, what is the current scenario when it comes for job opportunities for the budding civil engineers?
Mr. Nanda, go ahead.
Safdar, I love you because this is my favorite subject and that's my next project outside Mahindra in my personal life. The solution to this country of creating employment does not lie with large petrochemical, large automotive, large steel, because everything will ultimately have to be automated. We need small entrepreneurs. And the project I am working on is take retired people to mentor the small people and make them entrepreneurs. We will, please don't always look for a job. Try to be an entrepreneur. If you are in a small village, you start your own construction company to make those houses for those people. There is a huge ecosystem. If you want to have a thing on that, I'm very happy to speak for 3 hours on how it can be done. But don't only look at job.
Shreyal,
Have not come from job.
So I'm taking the next question. So we've had a lot coming on 3D printing. This is one of the comments, but one question also said that there's a challenge in also convincing clients to opt for 3D printing constructions. So if we could just, respond to this, that how can you convince client to adopt 3D printing and what is the future of 3D printing construction in India?
Ankur, would you like to take that?
Yeah, sure. Not very sure whether buildings can be 3D printed. I'm sure they can, but I guess we are doing something as close to 3D printing as it gets. We basically making molds and producing stuff inside a factory and assembling it. That's as close as we get to 3D printing today. So I guess the question from Mohammed is about repeatability, quality, specifications, and being very consistent. Like a 3D printer will produce the same thing again and again and again once you tell it what to do. So it's pretty much being done. I'd be happy to take people around to our facilities and show them how it's done. Or you can check us out on YouTube or on the internet, and you will see how we produce these kind of things in the factory. They basically, the bathrooms come out of molds, little pods. So we are getting there, but whether it means that there is stuff that is going to come out of a printer and convert into a part of a home, not very sure we are there yet.
So
And
I
the
think
last
already IIT Madras has just inaugurated its building just yesterday, which is 3D printed. Yeah, go
Okay,
ahead.
very good. I'd like to look at that. Interesting.
There's a gentleman, I'm forgetting his name, in Jaipur, and I had gone and seen his facilities for the last 6-7 years. He's been doing 3D printing for, but more for industrial this thing than for residential construction, where you need special skills. Pratap, I had another meeting at 4:30. I'm already 9 minutes over time. So can I please sign off?
All right, sure, absolutely.
Yeah,
Thank you very
I'm
much.
also going to be
Yeah, thank
moving
you.
on.
And sorry
Yes,
for
sir.
calling you AUNT.
Right. Okay, thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thanks.
you.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.